You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG.
Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries, a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games where two GMs talk about their recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss a banger of an episode. Well, hello there, sages and adventurers. My name is Jody. And with me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague, Matt. How's the deja vu treating you these days?
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Damn it.
Oh, man. The first one was way better.
It was so much better the first time. I wish you all had been here. All right. Today's episode focuses on a session that absolutely had it all. Matt, you ran this absolute gem. Take us to the table.
This session had everything.
It's great.
I mean, Jody, I'm going to keep it quick, because I want to dive into the details. There was a trip to the bottom of a lake. There was drowning, and actually a multitudinous amount of drowning, a multitudinous number of people dealing with that fairly life-threatening issue. A legendary monster made an appearance for the first time, a monster that had been rumored many, many moons ago in both game and real time. There was the exploration of some caves on an island. There was rock climbing. And most importantly, there was a boat.
All right, let's gather around the fire and unpack this banger of an episode. Session.
That's a Freudian slip, because this is going to be a banger of an ep.
There we go. All right. So I was delighted to be a player at this wonderful, wonderful session that Matt ran us through in the ongoing Dolmenwood using Shadowdark rules campaign. We've been playing going on 3 years now. And we're piloting the not aforementioned boat, but the campaign ship, if you will, into harbor. We can see shore of the end of the campaign in the distance. We got a ways to go. We're just circling the big bad evil at the end of the drain. But we had to cross a lake, and not just cross the lake. Nay, that would be boring. There is something at the bottom of the lake. I should have done
something at the bottom of the lake.
Thank you for the pickup.
I don't know if listeners will tell us whether or not that was an acceptable.
It's the right reference.
Yeah. Yes, you did. And as always, just a heads up, spoilers for Dolmenwood. I'm not even going to try and couch them as light or heavy spoilers. I don't know anymore. But there is a lake smack dab in the middle of Dolmenwood called Lake Longmere, and it is rumored to be the location of a terrible beast called Big Chook.
And we have been interested in chooking on it for a long time.
No!
Table joke.
Yeah. So Big Chook is this legendary monster. There are many different kind of descriptions of what it might look like. And in fact, the book itself is, I think, permissible, or I guess gives permission to interpret it in many different ways. And I have interpreted it as essentially a kraken, like entity, or at least that's the model we were using. And I think I have explained that it is of that kind of legendary status, that like that's kind of how I'm interpreting it, is this thing that is both legendary, feared, and yeah, I think let's start there, Jody, because I have worked very hard in this campaign to not just give you all what you want. This has not been a wish fulfillment campaign, and that isn't hard for me, but I think every GM struggles with the balance between the players genuinely wanting to experience the world and the content in it, but not just giving them the opportunity. Like this wasn't going to be me giving you guys a magic sword. If I had made it eminently possible and given you all these hooks and reasons to go, like, you just would have been dead. So you could have done this at any point, but it sort of manifested in a way that I thought was really lovely, in that it happened very late in the campaign, and it happened in a moment where you were all in extremely dire straits. So I don't know, like,
that was a benefit to seeing Big Chook, is that there was no thought of let's fight the thing, because of some things that happened before that we'll come back and touch on.
Sure.
I want to talk about that wish fulfillment, because I've mentioned this from my perspective a few times on the show, of as a GM, when I'm in the GM seat, not the player seat, I really bristle at the feeling of a player asking for me to wish fulfill for them. I find it just distasteful. It makes me not have fun GMing when that comes up. And it's, I wrote a 2-page backstory and this is the villain, and I really want the villain to be the focus of our campaign. That kind of wish fulfillment is like, man, that's not what I'm here for. My character just really needs a +3 magic sword, and until you give me that, I'm not going to be happy. Then we shouldn't play together. This is not that in any way. I don't think the revelation of getting to see this, we got to go see Smaug, right? We got to go see the thing. We saw Sauron, sort of. But one of these big legendary critters. Now, in Dolmenwood, and it's shipping now, and it's starting to be getting people's hands, and it's available at time of recording. And there's a player-facing map that's on the inside cover of the book in a variety of spots. You printed it early, and it's adorned our game room wall for as long as we've been in this campaign. You see Lake Longmere very clearly, and there are giant tentacles sticking up out of it. And we, as players, were looking at this player map and went, "What's that?" And then we got rumors. It's called Big Chook. And ever since then, we've been like, we would like to see Big Chook. And it's like, it may not even exist. And we're like, oh, no, Matt. It exists, and we're going to see it. But, 3 years later, that hardly qualifies as wish fulfillment. And there are other things on the map for those folks who know and have seen the Dolmenwood player-facing map. There are other landmarks that are just nestled away here and there, especially if you look at the center of the map, Prigwort, which is the center town. There's some other little goodies that you're like, wait, what the heck is that thing? And we did the same thing as players and went, we're going to go see that stuff. And here at the end, rather than wish fulfillment, I think what you've been doing is closing some of those narrative loops that we as players have said, I am curious about this thing, and there have been rumors along the way. They haven't been dead ends. So we're going to come back and poke at this thing. And Big Chook was, because it was a legendary, mythological, if you will, critter, it was really satisfying to get to see it. But yeah, we were in no condition to even consider let's go fight the ancient horror of the lake. That was not viable. And
I just want to, so yes, and I want to get to that post haste, but I do want to say that there's a lot of conversation online, especially with the Glass Cannon folks doing their hex crawl in the gloaming. There's a lot of people online who have been wondering about how to do a hex crawl, because mapping a dungeon is one thing, and that's already a challenge. Like, people already have questions about, like, how do you get your players to map a dungeon? And my response is, like, they'll do it if they want to. And I think we should actually come back to that at some point, because it's a question we've gotten a number of times. But we'll leave that to the side for a second. But what I think Dolmenwood gets right about a hex crawl is this player map, because not everyone can do this. This is like a highly stylized, artistic rendering that is diegetic. It is supposed to be like an in-world, narratively, kind of quote-unquote correct version of how the people of the wood would view it, and how someone in the wood might use their cartography skills. Like, you have found, and this isn't a spoiler necessarily for players, but like, you have found out that there's roads and places on there that are wildly, like, further or closer or whatever. Like, it's not an accurate map at all. However, unlike perhaps a rumor that is just absolutely false, this map just makes you want to explore.
Yep.
And so I have found it to be the singular best piece of the hex crawl puzzle. And I think that any GM that is running a hex crawl, you would do well to find some way, whether it's with very rudimentary skills in GIMP or Adobe Photoshop or whatever, go in and edit some of those things out of the GM facing map and give it to your players, because this has been the source of almost everything we've done.
Yeah,
is this map.
I've actually been doing this with Forge of Fury. I bought the PDF version of it, and literally through MS Paint, I've been opening up maps as JPEGs, and then you go in and color select, and with very limited skills, a little cut and pasting and moving, you can take all of the detail out and hide secret doors and take room numbers off and create player maps that I think in my last session, there was literally a moment of like, oh, wait, on the map, it shows that we're not in there. And it's like, yeah. And they were like, wait, so there's stuff on the map. And they had this very realization that they were in a hallway that isn't on the map that they're in because they went through secret doors.
Yes.
And then started going, well, where else and how? Oh, I see why we couldn't see. Oh, neat. And all these things. So yeah, the player facing map is huge. And I think for this session, and I think it's good that you started with wish fulfillment as an idea. It was, we've played in this world long enough that some of these really big secrets, it is time to show the goods, as it were.
Totally, 100%.
Or the bads in the case of this thing.
Yeah. And you know, and I want to get to now, because I think this will actually take up the bulk of our discussion, because speaking of it's time because you guys have been playing for a long time. We have multiple player characters at level 9. Everybody I think is level 5 or above at this point. And we are on the precipice of kind of the final dungeon crawl of our game. And it's going to be a long dungeon crawl. We talked a little bit about my designing of Horblight Keep, this kind of like final dungeon, and I've done a lot more work on it. I'm really excited about getting you guys in there and then doing a teardown episode of like how it turned out. But the reason that we're in end game scenario is partially because y'all are of end game level. And that we almost were at end game.
Well,
so
yeah.
I want you to set this up from a player side of things, because I think it will, I don't know. I'm very interested in having this conversation. I think you and I have actually been very careful not to have this conversation in full. And I am, we'll say this just as a little teaser to the listener. I am legitimately not worried, but I am apprehensive about having this conversation, just because there are some things that I know you're going to ask me, or I know we're going to talk about, where like, I don't know, you might disagree with the calls that I made, and I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can. So set this thing up, because I've kind of raised the stakes there a little bit.
A little bit. Well, as players, we knew that not only was Big Chook out on Lake Longmere, and we had wanted to see that for some time. We have some other rumors, especially relevant to one of our player characters in particular, who's had a wild ride of an evolution of their experience and their life in the wood. We've talked before about it picked up some levels of witch, not entirely of their own choosing, but also of their own choosing. And there were some maybe secrets. So going to the bottom of the lake became a thing we were interested in doing. Now, obviously, this presents some really terrifying challenges of we are going to this deep, ice cold lake, and we're going to dive down to the bottom. How in the hell does that work? Well, thankfully, we have the world's most powerful mage on our party.
And a homebrewed spell called Air Sphere.
Right. So she summons up the air bubble. There is a classic D&D module. I will try and find it and drop it in Discord and put it in the show notes, where there is an image of an air sphere and a party in a bubble of air floating down to the bottom. And there's like a dragon turtle or something huge looming off in the distance, but they're just floating down there to go check it out, as one does.
Sure.
So we head down, and also, if you're new to us, we start each session where Matt does with everybody gets a luck token. So we head down and we start exploring under this air sphere, and it is established that the lake is quite deep. It's 200 feet deep, if I remember
It's
right.
almost 300 feet deep.
So
at this point,
that's an issue. We use some weights and things that we can get down there as quickly as possible so we can breathe. We have some rope. We're good to go. We get to the bottom. We start exploring, and we find a bunch of sunken ships. It's very cool. And we start poking around. My thief in particular starts going, well, I'm a thief. Is there anything valuable? So there's something in particular we're looking for. I'm going to dance around what we were looking for, just because I think it is I don't know if it is a deep lore spoiler on Dolmenwood, so I'm just going to skim past that bit.
Sure.
We were down there. We're looking for something. It's important. And lo and behold, we poke at a particular sunken elf ship. My character and the aforementioned Rain and Wind, as I call her, world's most powerful sorcerer. We find an elven boat. We start poking around, and a very angry spirit, somewhere akin to a banshee, but seemingly a lot more angry and a lot more powerful, shows up and is not happy that my thief is just willy-nilly picking things up out of the wreckage of their dead bodies and ancestors. So combat ensues, and luck tokens begin being spent around the table pretty quickly because things are going poorly. The first thing that comes up that is a fascinating call that I want to talk very briefly about is the combat is looking not great. One of our wizards, we have a mossling wizard who is kind of like a fungus dwarf, which is really selling them short, but a mossling wizard, Usador, has already had problems with his spells down here underwater. So my thief's trying to get him out of the way. And Rain and Wind, our legendary sorceress, decides to grab onto this spirit and cast lightning bolt underwater and go, hey, this seems like it would be really effective. And the rulings you made here set the tone for everything to come after.
Yeah.
And was extremely cool. So.
Oh, good. Well, okay. So this is so I ruled that, and this is now established, that, you know, if you cast lightning bolt underwater, I think we've established, and this isn't a written down rule per our last episode, Jody. This is an ongoing ruling, I suppose, that it adds 2d6 damage. And she has advantage on that spell, and she rolled a crit.
Yes.
However, that additional damage in a space like this, anybody else who's in the water who's within near has to make a check, and I believe I made it a Constitution check, because that was, or you're going to take damage. I might be misremembering this, but you know, our table culture is that if I misremember it, we'll figure it out the next time. But the long and short of it is that it did extra damage. She rolled a crit, and some people had to make a check to negate. Actually, I believe it was just to take half damage.
Yes,
because you're gonna take some damage here. I actually find that taking half damage, even though it's not really a thing in Shadow Dark, is a useful tool, and I will use it very, very sparingly on occasion. And here, where it felt like it's not possible to avoid this, you are literally in the water. And we established that the water can permeate the air sphere, but that the air is like, we were playing fast and loose with the fiction there, but regardless, this is a fantasy game. More on that later. But yeah, that was my ruling is that everybody's going to take damage, and she just obliterated this banshee,
right?
But also in doing so, obliterated like large chunks of hit points on many different PCs.
Right. I was delighted to have miraculously passed the check with my comedically low total of hit points on my 5th level thief. Actually, it was really funny because everybody who failed the check was somebody who was wearing chainmail.
Yeah.
And everybody who wasn't wearing, which was just happenstance. I think you could have been a jerk there and said,
I probably should have
disadvantage on anybody wearing metal armor.
Probably should have, but there was a lot going on.
There was a lot going on. Now, what is happening in the background, I have hung on to my luck token, and Rain and Wind, our aforementioned power sorcerer, has held on to her luck token. Everybody else is spent out now. And she and I were kind of like shooting each other looks of like, hey, no, we're not spending these because we're 300 feet underwater and we need the air bubble. So,
which only lasts for 10 rounds.
Which lasts for 10 rounds.
Very, very close to coming.
And was ticking down because this combat went poorly. It was, I mean, it took 3 or 4 rounds to get down there, plus time exploring, then a few rounds of not putting this thing down. And that was part of why she gambled on, I'm going to cast this go for broke spell because I can't be faffing around if this air bubble runs out. Then we're in a bad way. 300 feet underwater.
It would be terrible if that happened.
That would be a TPD.
Well,
total
Jody.
Party drowning. So we bypass the fight. There's, I think, 2 rounds left on the timer while we're tending to our wounded. Rain and Wind's turn comes around, and she goes, okay, well, I'm going to recast.
Tier 5 spell.
Tier 5 spell. Need a 15. No problem. Plus a lot. Here we go. Click, click, click. Oh no, it's a natural 1. One of our house rules here, important to note, is natural 1s can be downgraded with luck tokens to failed casts to bypass the miscast, but you cannot, if you roll a natural 1 on a spell cast, it fails. You can not miscast, but it fails. So the air bubble goes pop. And there's nothing we spend the luck token to avoid a tier 5 miscast 300 feet underwater.
That would have been potentially the ball game.
Yeah, that would have been, so a 3-year-long campaign is now 300 feet, 6 players are 300 feet underwater with no oxygen.
Yep.
Go.
We
couldn't do that part.
No, that's very good.
That was the problem.
So I want to say from the outset here, I just want to kind of level set that, you and I, we tend to be more of what might be called narrative GMs in different ways. However, I think up until this point, there's not much that I have done that one could consider like preserving the narrative. Thus far, I think this session, it had been all of my rulings. I think, even maybe not the most sort of diehard GMs, but I think most people would say like, yeah, these are being adjudicated in a way that you're not trying to preserve characters' lives for a story. In this moment, I had to really think about, okay, I know that there's gonna be some calls that have to be made, and we went to the swimming and drowning rules, which I had not updated with the new errata. It's like one of 2 things that have been errataed from the published Shadow Dark core rulebook till now. I'll just kind of go over the errata right now. In the Shadow Dark core rulebook, there are no rounds that player characters can hold their breath. In the errata, player characters can hold their breath for a minimum of 1 round or rounds equal to their Constitution modifier. And this I'm saying this at the top because it will be relevant later, because I missed a very important piece of Dolmenwood lore that I think actually this somewhat counterbalances. So from the get-go here, you guys are on the bottom of the lake, and you have to start going up. Again, it's been established that you have a rope that is attached to the boat. It's been established it is established very quickly that our 2 chainmail-wearing folks who you guys use that chainmail to get yourself down to the bottom as quickly as possible and holding on this rope, using their chainmail basically as an anchor to kind of move quicker. They're now doffing their armor.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing so in a way that's just throw it off, and it's going to take at least an extra round. And we start making every single round Constitution checks to see if you start drowning.
Right.
And those con checks, like you've established, there's 2 luck tokens on the table. Those con checks end up going poorly for a handful of people. And so I just kind of want to level set there at the beginning that like, this is one of those moments as a GM that I don't think any GM wants to find themselves in. Even if you're one of those more hardcore GM, like no one wants to find themselves maybe 4 to 5 sessions at most away from finishing a campaign with characters that have ground their way to high levels. No one wants to be presented with the potential for all of that to just in the blink of an eye, I don't know. I just can't imagine that anyone would be excited about adjudicating this.
Right.
I think everybody's going to have kind of a little bit of a lump in their throat. So like I was genuinely worried, and I told you guys that like this is a genuinely worrying and concerning situation. But from a player's perspective, where were you at? Like I know that you as a player and being a GM can kind of see the matrix in a little bit of a way that maybe the other players don't. That part of their brain isn't active, or they just don't want to see it that way or whatever. It's not like they can't. But where were you at, man?
Well, I was puckered with everybody else. There were 6 players, and you as our GM, there were 7 puckered beeholes going around the table.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's an image. So my GM brain kicked on for a few heartbeats, and then I went, okay, we're 300 feet down. We have to get to the surface. There are movement rates. There are swim rates. There are con checks to make. I looked at my character, who was doing fine. All 11 hit points were still intact. My -3 constitution score went, okay, I'm going to say adios to this guy. He's not making it. The math says I'm out. So how do I help? And then I went, and this is where I can give myself some credit as a player GM. I went, Matt has to make a call here. What is Matt's call going to be about how long do we have? How fast can we move? And then I went where I think I knew you were going to go to this place. And this is how it seemed to me was, okay, players, this is bad. How are you getting out of it?
Yeah, 100%.
It became the game of y'all are screwed. Here's the deal. You have 10 rounds at 30 feet a round. This is the amount of damage we're talking about. Once you start failing, it will happen every round. Once you fail, go.
Yeah, I mean, you move at half speed, so if you spend the entire round swimming, there's not a harsh current. It is calm water, so you don't need to make any strength checks. It's just we're actually going to use hard and fast rulings on feet here because it's important.
And you could have said that because you're swimming, it's halved movement again, so it could have been 20 rounds, but that was a spot where I was like, you could have ruled that, and I would have been like, wow, that's brutal. It's also right. But
if you're double moving, if you're using your action, you're foregoing your action to move in Shadowdark, you can move again. And if you're moving near, you're moving approximately 30 feet. Half of that is 15, double that is back to 30.
Right.
That is where I stand by that. And I think it is akin. I am a swimmer. Right? And so this is
not a casual swimmer.
No. I have been a swimmer my whole life, and for me, personally, you know this, Jody, I find some of the mechanics in Dungeons & Dragons to be antithetical to my experience, or maybe antithetical, just not in line with my experience. Backpacking, for instance, we've talked about this on the program before, that walking that many miles is not reasonable.
As a former athletic human who is now old and out of shape and pudgy, it's really not viable.
Right. And I also think that, like, this is an unrealistic situation.
Yes.
Like, you guys in the quote unquote real world, you should have died.
Right then. I'm sorry, you're done.
Right. However,
but that's what I want to clarify.
Yes.
Here is that would have been the end on a natural one. On a 5% chance of failure, the entire campaign's over.
Well, and also,
why that's unsatisfying. That's not acceptable stakes. So I totally agree, and everybody agreed that you went, here is the problem in front of you.
Yes.
And you did something that I, as a GM, have really been working on, and I've gotten noticeably better now that I've locked this into my, we all do this as GMs. You have your brain goes, work on this thing. Put it, if you use a GM screen, put a little post-it that says, remember to do this thing. Mine is say the mechanics out loud. And you set the terms of the challenge. You have 10 rounds. This is what the tests look like. This is what you have to do. If you're going to move double, this is what the movement rate is. Right. And everybody at the table went, got it. And we started working the problem.
And you guys did a great job. I think I could have been meaner with my adjudication of some of the ideas. However, and this is something that is that's very idiosyncratic to every GM, and I'm not going to get into all the details about what. There's one thing I want to kind of talk about that I think is just kind of an interesting note, and something that I think I just want to get out there as a mistake that I made. But what I saw in this moment was a group of people sitting around the table who all had the sobering realization that unless they thought they did some lateral thinking, and unless they really took the situation seriously, which you guys always do, but there's this was another level. There have only been a few of these in the campaign, and there have been basically There's only really been one other time, which was a combat against a very powerful mage, like 6 months ago, that y'all were really in a position where things could have tilted to this badly. Primarily because you guys are great players, and there are 6 of you, and when you have 6 brains, working together who are all willing to engage with the world, you get a lot of really great answers to problems that your GM just can't say no to. Right? And if I'm accurately and adjudicating the rules and the world, in this case, there were ideas that we've established were like the fiction was working a particular way. There was one of our players has ostensibly like a kind of free cantrippy spell that they get to use for their ancestry. They are a mossling. They're a moss dwarf, basically. And they have the ability to essentially like quasi-magically animate ropes. And I probably stretched that a little bit, the power level of that. But we have established that this character, literally since the first session that they were around, this is the only character that has lived the entire time. I'm not crazy.
No, that's
right?
accurate.
That is accurate. Literally from the first session, this player and their character have been using this ability in both kind of tricksy ways, but also in fairly profoundly useful ways on occasion. And so it was that moment that I felt like you do have choices as a GM. You always have the opportunity to adjudicate something maybe in quote unquote in favor of the player, and maybe more liberally or leniently, or in favor of just pressing your finger down and grinding them into the ground. And for me, I know that some people will disagree with this, but I do think that this is core to the way that I run the game. I like to reward good ideas, and I also like to reward ideas that have inertia behind them, right? Like if your character has been committed to using this ability and doing so in very interesting and cool and thoughtful ways, then when the chips are down, you get to use it a little bit more liberally than you might otherwise, right? If this was the first time that this player had ever looked at that ability and said, wait, I have this thing that I can move the rope, I would have ruled very differently. But the inertia behind that particular player's decision-making throughout a nearly, like a 3-year-long campaign or whatever, that does affect the way that I run and adjudicate.
Right. It's in alignment with what is expected from the world. And I think that one of the things I've said a lot and will continue to beat the drum of is, as a GM, if you make a ruling, what you want to see happen, or what I want to see happen, is the players around the table, whether it is a harsh ruling or a generous ruling, you want to see your players go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's the response you're looking for. Oh, that sucks. That makes sense. When you said it's 30 feet around, it's going to take you 10 rounds to get to surface, and we're going to start a timer of 10 rounds. And if you're not at the surface by then, that's it. Like that's the math. Everybody went, okay, cool, got it. It makes sense. It just made sense. That was, right. I mean, yes, it's easy to hide behind math and go, well, the math says. Yeah. Again, though, this character, when you ruled that Brimble, our mossling fighter, who would rather rope whistle and thread whistle than fight most of the time,
sure,
said, I'm going to use this rope to pull. I'm going to magically help this rope pull everybody up. We waited around for our ranger and priest to drop their chainmail armor and carry up our mossling wizard. So the 4 of them are around behind the 2 elves. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to, not only is everybody going to swim together, but we're going to magically add this rope on. You went, yeah, you're able to get extra movement out of this. You are able to speed up the rate at which you are ascending.
Right.
And I thought so I had the luxury of, and this is the thing you and I haven't talked a ton about, is that the next day I was running my Forge of Fury game, mm-hmm. and Rain and Wind in the Dolmenwood game and Usador, our mossling wizard, both play also in the game I run. So the next day they show up, and the topic of conversation before I started running was, oh man, that was a spicy moment. And everybody was in agreement that like, damn, that was crazy. That was so spicy. I can't believe we got out of it. Matt was lenient but reasonable, was the overarching opinion. Was you could have been a jerk and nobody would have batted an eye of like, no, I was a TPK and we all died. Nobody, I mean, it would have been super sad trombone in the maximum.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that moment with Brimble making the ruling that rules is written, but it does mention rope control and things like that now that she's leveled up quite a bit.
Yeah, and these are all rules that I wrote.
Right. Well, but they are
based on the Dolmenwood rules, of
written
course,
down. We do have,
but
we have them written on as these
are
your
zines,
abilities. They are a zine, sort of a very very chubby zine. Yeah. So it felt like again, you got to the right place in this very tense ruling moment of that makes sense. Now, in contrast, Rain and Wind was like, oh well, I have Dimension Door, Misty Step, whatever it's called,
Dimension Door.
I can just snap my fingers and teleport up to the surface. And you went, no, you can't. Well, why not? Well, you can't see the surface, and you do have to be able to see.
Right.
And what you gave the out was you can do an amount of distance.
Right.
You have some known amount, and it is faster than swimming.
Sure.
Unfortunately, at that point, my -3 con kicked in, and
this is the moment I want to talk about.
Okay,
because
I wasn't sure if you wanted to do this. It feels self-indulgent for me.
No, there are moments and this is, I don't want to deviate too much because I want to talk about the other awesome stuff that happened in this session. But like, there are moments in role-playing games, we've been talking about this a lot off mic, that like, I like drama. And I think that that's different than enjoying role-playing games as a storytelling enterprise. There are just moments that, like, this was a very dramatic moment. It came about organically because of die rolls and because of player choices and also because of my adjudication and whatnot. But like, I want you to walk us through this moment because this is a little bit self-indulgent for you. But I want to preface it by saying that like, this is another opportunity for me to be a jerk in which I leaned into what I think is the best part of role-playing games, which is when players do something creative that is also characterful and also helps the entire table feel like they're a part of a sort of moment, right? Like, I think everybody around the table was sort of wrapped with anticipation when you were kind of describing what this was happening. So walk us through this, because I thought this was a very cool and just lovely moment.
So my character and Rain and Wind, my character is the lowest level character in the party, is the latest addition to the party by a pretty sizable chunk. That Lament, as that's his name, because Dolmenwood elf names. So Lament showed up really late and has really latched on to, because he's also spectacularly ignorant, that this sorceress who introduced herself as the world's most powerful sorcerer, he was like, well, kick ass, answered all my problems, and is just kind of blindly latched on to her as, well, you will solve all my problems, then I just have to follow you around and everything. And that's like basically his whole story. Is there's some background from his own kingdom that he's kind of resolved, and he's like, all right, cool, I'm going to follow this chick around and she'll sort everything out for me, and it's fun. Weirdly, he has bailed her out a bunch of times now, shockingly, way punching out of, I'm going to be honest, trying to get him killed. I'm going to have this guy with terrible stats go out like a champ.
Truly terrible.
Yeah, he has a good dex and a good charisma, and everything else is jaw-droppingly bad. So we teleport away from the group because now Rain and Wind, the sorceress, does have a sense of like she owes this guy, and he's totally oblivious to it. So she grabs him and is like, I'm going to teleport us up to the surface and get us the hell out of here. Also, everybody is very aware my character is a wet paper bag, and hey, you're going to make con checks or die. Oop, see ya, dude. So she grabs me and is like, we're teleporting you out of here because, that's how it's going to go. Again, that nobody at the table was like, what a jerk move. It was like, nope, that tracks. The two elves are peace out. Well, I don't pass my saves, and neither does she. and she has taken a truckload of damage from the lightning she cast. We're not in great shape, and looks like we're both going to drown. Like we're like 100 feet above the rest of the party, and it looks like we're both going to drown.
Basically less than 30 feet from the surface.
So she fails, and she starts to go on. She drops to 0 hit points or below or whatever. And my turn is next. And I go, well, I have literally 1 hit point left. And I said, the question I asked was, can I give her my hit point? Because my dude's like, yeah, she's the most powerful sorceress in the world. She's going to live and I'm not. And that's how this goes. He's not really able to think more than that many steps ahead. That's kind of what he's got. So that's what I did. And then you asked the very awkward question of like, how are you giving her a hit point? I was like, well, we're underwater drowning. I'm just going to do the like breath of life, kiss her. It was Maximum Theater Kid vibe. Like This was a very, this is very Critical Role of us. That is what kind of player I am. I'm not ashamed.
No, it really leads. It's the kind of player I am too. I'm unabashed.
And so and there was an audible gasp from my player to the right, who is maybe our singularly most lore focused player, who like actually has stress. If we end on a cliffhanger, she is stressed out for 2 weeks. It's delightful, and so I was like, yeah, and I kiss her, and I don't even remember what you rolled, but it happened. And she got one more round, and I was like, yeah, I just let go and go limp. And she's like, no, I grab him, and we go up to the surface, and I'm going to try and stabilize him. And then the dice told a story.
What happens? You tell me.
She rolled a natural 20.
Yeah, she rolls a natural 20, and table goes wild. It's crazy. It's wonderful, poetic, and I mean, like, that's the stuff. This is the stuff that kind of makes role-playing games sort of legendary, right? It's like, that shouldn't have happened. Like, that's not how the dice work.
Right.
And yet, everybody has a story. If you play D&D or any of its derivatives or whatever long enough, everybody has a story of the only thing that can work here is a natural 20, and what does somebody roll? They roll the natural 20. And like, I don't know, for me, this is why natural 20s, I am one of those people that's like, you got to respect the nat 20. Like, I don't allow people to roll for things that are impossible, but if I allow a roll, then I'm going to abide by that nat 20 means that something special happens. And so we usually rule that even on a stabilization check, you come back with a hit point. I've wanted to get away with doing away with unconsciousness. We're sort of in a liminal space there, unconscious being a liminal space, I suppose. But you come back with 1 hit point.
We start tugging on the rope like crazy to get the rest of them up out of the water.
Everybody.
Unbelievably, everybody shows up. And why this feels self-indulgent to talk about this moment that I had of giving this hit point and doing this thing and blah, 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 was I know that if we had the other 5 players here and we said, hey, walk me through what happened from the bottom of the lake to getting back up on the boat, every single one of them would tell a different story than you've heard just now. It would be just as crazy and detailed. It would be so unique. And this is, for me, one of those why role-playing games, why not board games, why not tabletop war games, which I do all of them, is we told a story moment with 7 people. There are 7 different versions of that story, and every one of them is freaking awesome.
And this is, you've heard me say this many times, but this is the thing that only role-playing games can do.
Yeah.
I am of the belief that, and I know that some people disagree, and like that's obviously fine. We are probably on record too many times as saying that's okay here on the old Dungeon Master Diaries. But for me, I try and lean into, when I think about role-playing games, I try and always, when I'm GMing, lean into the stuff that only role-playing games can do whenever possible. And like, this was a moment where fair, occasionally maybe lenient, but fair rulings led to, in retrospect, a story that this will be a seminal moment of this campaign forever. Everyone will always remember that session where you almost died at the bottom of Lake Longmere. And anyone who plays Dolmenwood for any amount of time, the phrase, we almost died, or we almost drowned on the bottom of Lake Longmere, that sentence will hit like a truck, because it is it leads very nicely and dovetails into the next thing that happens, which is that I was not being a kind GM.
No, you
because
straight
I
up
was
Tolkien'd
rolling.
us.
I was rolling for each of those rounds. We were rolling on the crawling clock.
Yes.
And it ticked down to 0, and I think everybody at the table knew exactly what was going to happen when it ticked down to 0. I still rolled to see if what we all knew was going to happen happened. I don't know if anybody saw it, but there is an X in 6 chance that Big Chook shows up when you are faffing around in Lake Longmere, and which you were.
Oh, we were maximum faff.
I had telegraphed that you heard the wail and the noise or in the distance. And sure enough, you guys all get up on this boat. You have like 2 rounds on this boat, and then you hear and you can see in the distance that something terrible is coming. And this is where I feel like, sorry guys, like this is the story. This is the out of the frying pan into the fire situation. This is pulp storytelling, etc. This is what happens. And that was all adjudicated by the dice because I'm sorry, but there is a point at which procedure. I like procedural ways of going about things because, and I like going in rounds. I like using timers because they create a shared understanding of stakes that I oftentimes feel in other modern D20 fantasy games. We hand wave so many of the time elements and so many of the other elements, and you just can't really get these out of the frying pan into the fire moments without foisting them on your players as a GM. There was everyone at the table knew exactly what was happening, and no one batted an eye because you all saw the timer going down, but you're like, that's not a problem. We're going to drown. We'll deal with that later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then this terrible monster shows up and everyone freaks out because it's been this campaign long thing. But then everyone realizes oh my God, basically no one has any hit points. Everyone's soaking wet. 2 people who usually have armor have no armor on. People are out of spells, and you just start booking it on this boat.
Right, and that's the beauty of this style of, if you will, OSR, or that milieu of whatever that means. You're short on hit points. This thing is happening. You're the heroes. What do? Oh, we freaking run.
Yeah.
There was one player who had very few hit points and was determined to cast some spells and was like, could I? And you were like, yeah, you'd have to wait around for it to get closer. And we all kind of gave him the look, and he was like, nah, we're good. Time to go. Can we start finding some garbage to make the boat go faster? And so we saw the legendary monster as we wished. And that's the beauty of Shadow Dark, of Dolmenwood, of OSR vibes, is we saw the giant thing. High five. Well, did you fight it? Did you? No, we freaking saw it. That's it. I saw Smaug. High five. I'm done. And I'm telling you, I saw it. I was there. This party saw the legendary thing.
Yeah.
That's the reward. And that's so hard to do in other systems. It's so unsatisfying. And so, massive hats off to you. You also went above and beyond. I want to give a shout out here of you painted up a model. We had the water mat out with our boat. Yeah. So there was the moment of this very chonky, very weird and wonderful dragon kraken, I guess, thing that definitely lived up to the hype of what the actual hell. Oh, yeah, we're not fighting. That's just its head out of the water. No, we're not fighting that. We're leaving. Also, half of us are at single digit and in some case 1 hit point.
Yeah, and I mean, to some people that might sound kind of like a bummer, oh, you didn't get to fight the monster. But I think what's interesting about Shadow Dark is when you keep hit points low and you keep everything nice and kind of tight and tidy in terms of, these are some level 9 characters, folks. We're almost topping out, and those characters were like, no, thank you.
Right. We've also seen other beings in the woods that don't abide by the rules. They just go,
yeah, no.
Oh, I cast this thing. He says no. Well, there's no counter spells for you.
Yeah, this guy just does.
This is a Fey Lord. No.
Yeah, he sneezes a little bit.
Yeah.
He's slightly allergic to your fireball.
I sneak up on him. He goes, what are you doing?
Right.
I rolled a 23.
Yeah.
He doesn't care.
See, now, and this is when I'm like, this is when the natural 20 thing kind of is interesting because, succeeding maximally can still be you get seen by the fairy lord who's ostensibly a god.
Yeah.
Right? Like, sorry, like I set the stakes. Like, yeah, you can roll for this, but I just want to let you know that like it's not going to turn out how you want it to turn out regardless of what you roll.
Yeah, that's the player raises an index finger, says, excuse me, I rolled a 20, and the GM goes, I know, and then the player says, oh, well, allow me to recalibrate my understanding of the moment. So from this out of the frying pan into the fire moment, the next thing we do, so we've had this TPD, I'm sticking with it, this legendary monster appearance, this maximum theater kid moment, and now what could be more exciting than hex crawling? But that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to run away. And you ask the totally unreasonable question, where? Well, damn it. I'm still unclenching, if you will. And all six of us went, okay. And we had to like step back and go, wait a minute, what do we know? Where are we going? And it immediately turned into just hex crawling, but we had to make a really meaningful hex crawl decision of where are we going.
You're in the middle of a lake.
Right.
The shore is basically, for the purposes of mechanics, kind of equidistant anywhere you want to go. And, you guys have some landmarks and you have a goal.
And all of those landmarks are unknown to us. These are not traversed areas, and we can't go back really the way we came.
No,
because we brought a boat down a cliff, which is problematic. So we find what we decide to do is there is an island just outside of our ultimate destination. And we decide we're going to go try and find somewhere to R&R. People start healing each other while we're on the boat. They don't heal me. Still have 1 hit point, but I'm up. I'm functional. I'm involved, sort of.
It's a comedy. This party secretly wants you just to not have a character live very long. Anyways, continue.
Apparently. They didn't. No, she did shoot me with lightning. I just dodged it this time. Again, with the lightning. So we get to this island, and it was a lovely contrast of tone. If we go from this crazy, crazy, crazy exciting, now we're hex crawling, and now we have an environment we need to explore. Right. And we get to this island. It's incredibly vertical. There's a sea cave. There's clearly evidence of bats, but the sea cave seems relatively safe. And we start kind of working through the experience at this rock. And we go into, for lack of a better term, the analogy I would give for anybody listening is we kind of go into dungeon exploration mode of like, we're scouting the dungeon. We have this location. We think it's safe. Let's start scouting it. You set up, and this is, again, a little bit self-indulgent, this moment of like, hey, so this character just sacrificed, Jody, your character, Lament, just sacrificed himself for, rain and wind yet again. You guys have this moment. And comedically, one of our other characters is like, I'm just standing there under the two elves who are like clasping arms and like having this moment. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go do this thing. And then you made another interesting call here because Rain and Wind felt the need to be like, this guy won't stop throttling himself. I need to pay him back, or I need to do something like this stupid guy. Cause she's told me privately that like, basically she's like, I don't get it. Like, this guy's an idiot. Why won't he just like, why does he keep intervening? And which is this great character moment of like, my guy who can't understand anything is, and then like, she's super smart and she's like, I don't get it. And it's like, yeah, it's because you're trying to logic through it and he's an idiot. So she was like, can I give him a spell or something to that effect to protect him? And you kind of worked through that. And again, we're way off script now. Yeah. Rules is written, folks. Fast forward to the next topic, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I thought this was a good episode idea when you suggested it was because we just did this rulings rules, episode, and this session was so much about making in the moment rulings. So what I ruled is that Rain and Wind would have to spend a random spell slot. And this was a good example of, I should have asked for intent, like what was her intent, because there was a little bit of mismatch and we had to, but this is again, like the thing that you do when you're a GM is you hope that your players will say, oh, that's not exactly what I wanted to do. Because I think I narrated something and adjudicated it one way, and she was like, it's not quite what I was hoping for. I was like hoping for something that was more like this. And eventually what we got to is that she gave up a spell to give you con. And that was, the spell is permanently lost, and she can never learn it again. I don't actually remember what the spell was.
But it was a tier 2 spell.
But I do believe it was it was a randomly selected spell that she lost. And to me, when I don't know how to rule something, I will always talk to the player, of course, and try and figure out what feels right in terms of stakes. But what I like about using dice in these situations to determine things, whether it's the reward or the more often I like dice to determine the cost, because then the player has the opportunity to pay very little, perhaps, for a very large boon, or pay a lot. And then I don't have to make that call. I just leave it to the dice. I like the reward for this. I think the reward was 2 to your con score.
Yeah, it was a +1.
Essentially, you get a +1.
Taking me to still minus a bunch.
Yeah. But we didn't know the cost, and so we had to figure out what the cost was. And I oftentimes feel like that's the hardest thing to get players to agree to, because players are always going to want to minimize the cost. Or when I say always, I don't mean always, but it's inherent in players to want to minimize cost and risk, etc. And so I like leaving it up to die rolls, because then if the player gets away with something and they get one over on me, right? They didn't get one over on me. The dice just said that. And if they pay a maximally high price, again, that's not my fault. That was the dice that made that decision. And I like the gamble of it. And I think players like gambling. That's like a part of what makes RPGs also fun in terms of the dice mechanic, is that there's a bit of gambling, and you're gambling with your character's life a lot of the time, or at least the story or whatever of your character in the world. So for me, that was how I adjudicated it. I that's catnip for me, man. Like if a player says, can I sacrifice something to give another player character something? There's almost no instance where I will say no. There are obviously instances where we'll have to work through it and figure out something that's reasonable. But man, that was great. And then you took your constitution and you went right up the side of the mountain and you found the place where you guys went to sleep.
Yeah. With my 1 remaining hit point, despite asking quietly, because that's how I roll, quietly asking if anybody felt like helping me out. And I think they meant like help climb, not, hey, multiple of you have ability to heal. Anyone? No? Okay, cool. So you I think, correctly ruled here, because there's a lot of like, what was the rulings that created, what were the decision points that created this great session, other than a huge campaign of inertia to push to this bursting point. You just flat out said, as a thief, there are enough handholds that you can climb up the side of this. You're not going to need to roll. It's, midday at the time we were doing it, or late afternoon.
And you take your time. You have plenty of time. Right. You're not under any danger.
Yeah. And the rest of the party is going to hang out in the cave, making sure they're safe. And then what we were determining, why send the guy with 1 hit point up the top of the thing? We went, hey, everybody's beat to hell. We've lost a grip of spells. We have supplies for days on the boat. Like, we literally are not worried about being able to camp or anything, but we can't fight. We are at the point of any meaningful fight is going to be a real problem. So where are we going to camp? And so now we're getting to, so we went from hex crawl to now where, okay, we got it. We have to figure out a way to rest. We have to figure out a way to take some time away. We get to the top. We elect that it is worth the effort to drag everything up to the top of this thing and not stay in the cave in the boat. And there's also a seemingly magical abandoned tower. Talk about catnip.
I mean,
oh, really? Yeah. There is a lookout tower opposite the cliffside where the big mansion we are going to for our final dungeon crawl sits, and we can see it from here. Yeah. But this seems to be abandoned, but there's a magic aura. No, we're not going to go push the big glowing button on top of the hill. Of course, we're going to go stay there. So we call it a rest, and that is where we will pick up next time. And just an absolute banger of a session.
So I want to say two things about the end of this session. The first is I hand-waved a lot of dice rolls because I gave you guys the opportunity. I said, you can take the rest of the day and everybody gets up safely. You don't have to roll any dice. You take your time. You literally just take the rest of the day to get up to the top of this cliff. You rig up ropes, etc. You have all the supplies that you need. You have all of the various, the training in terms of your various skill sets. You have all the tools and you have all the time. And therefore, I'm not going to make anybody roll. And those are instances, again, where I think that certain GMs would have players roll, and that's fine. I feel like that we just got rid of some friction and everybody got to where they needed to get. You guys gave up the opportunity to do a lot of exploration because you were singularly focused on getting to the top of this thing. So there are some things that you missed, right? Like, and everyone knows, like, we didn't really explore the caves. But you give up that to get up to the top safely. And the last thing I want to talk about, though, Jody, is the fact that we are not using grinder mode in this game, in this campaign. And I really like grinder mode. I like grinder mode for a lot of reasons. It would bring our game to a screeching halt in terms of just the pacing. If right now you guys were to have to spend many, many days up here, would it be... I think it would be to the detriment of our game because the vibe is such. But I have been thinking about, I think it would be very interesting for in this moment for you guys to have to spend many, many days recovering on this mountain. That would make for a much different story. It would make for a completely breaking with the way that we have been running. I do think that grinder mode is one of those things that everybody should look at because on the one hand, it can feel very punishing. On the other hand, it can create situations where, like, y'all are going to be up on this cliff top for days. And that opens up some really interesting possibilities for random encounters, for character moments of, like, sitting around and just recovering, like what we can skip through those days and see if anything happens, and we can cover that time really quickly at the table. Or we can indulge a little bit and get into some character moments like you and Rain and Wind. Like, what does that look like over the days? Because the way we're going to do it, y'all are going to wake up in the morning because we already rolled to see if there was an encounter. And I think, actually, I have to go check my notes. But you're going to wake up in the morning and you're going to be at full hit points and full spells. And the pace of the game is going to continue and you guys are going to go on and do the next thing. And there isn't really going to be a break for you to have those moments of, like, of quote unquote downtime, right? Small d downtime in this case. So I don't know. We're running long on this ep here, but our torch is burning quite brightly for quite longer than expected. But what do you think about that? Just kind of really sort of being more in tune with grinder mode from the GM seat.
Yes, and is my response, because you're correct on all fronts. Would I enjoy having that montage to open next session with? Yes. Is that the way we've been doing things? No.
Right.
And that discordance may or may not matter. And that's a, hey, GM prerogative question. If you feel like the discordance is worthwhile, go for it because it's a cool way to start the next session, which is always, for me, the question, right? I was just blessed by the last time I ran, a character or player made a very offhand comment.
Right.
And they weren't even like, they just were like, said a thing. And they were like, da-da-da, and the conversation continued. And I was like, oh, I know where my next session is starting. Like, I'm all done. Prep's over for the next month because you just said a half a sentence. So that's really tough. And I think in this topic of grinder mode and rest, and we've had this epic session, and how do you come back to the table post an epic session, but you also know you have this quiet moment. Do you want to harness that quiet moment because of crescendo? And this is a thing I am not bashful about, that of the two of us, you are much better at pacing. I have to be very conscious and careful with my pacing. You just do it. Like, you just seem to, from jump of us playing together, you have a really quickly grasped onto both the importance of pacing and then how to ebb and flow. For me, it is a a still learning to get the plate to spin on a stick. For you, it is one of 10 plates spinning kind of thing. So you have the ability to play with it if you want to. I think in terms of zoomed out, talking about grinder mode or heroic play or, luck cavalcade or pulp mode or whatever you want to call them, right? Like I clearly just butchered multiple things.
Oh boy.
Is those modes really influence the type of game you're running. So we've mentioned a couple times, and if you aren't checking it out, check it out. The Glass Cannon podcast game of Shadow Dark.
Yeah.
For them, I think grinder mode really would fit what they're doing. I know they want to tell a more heroic story, so there would be a whoa, that's too much. I don't think so. The way the game is unfolding, I think it is perfect for what they're doing.
Yeah, because it forces you to slow down a little bit,
right?
And not slow down the game at the table, but slow down your characters to a pace that is interesting.
Yeah, and you as a group have to want that is making camp an interesting thing. And you as a player, Matt, yes, making camp is a very interesting thing. From jump. Can
I roll for the campfire? Famously.
What are we eating? Could somebody describe the pot of stew? And I love those little character moments, both as a GM and a player. So for me, grinder mode was like, yep, I like that. I agree with you for where we're at now and the inertia of the thing. I don't know. It would be a role-playing indulgence. I will tell you this. I do want a brief character moment somewhere early in our next session. I was going to tell you anyway, so I'll just do it on the show.
You're doing me a captive audience.
Yes.
No,
and you can say no, but now you can't. I had an epiphany, and I've already told the other character, but playing my character has felt like a little bit of a fish out of water. And something clicked, and I was like, oh, there it is. And I think it'll be interesting for the party to hear it. Speaking of hearing it, it's time, though, to hear from a sponsor.
Adventurer, does your back ache from hauling treasure chests up endless dungeon stairs? Has your healer politely suggested that perhaps you should build some core strength for your next underwater excursion? It's time to dive into the Gilded Griffin Aquatic Center, the realm's premier water training hall for heroes of all levels. At the Gilded Griffin, we believe training and fitness should be refreshing. That's why our state-of-the-art pools use buoyancy runes to reduce joint strain, making it perfect for warriors recovering from injuries. Now, some upgrades. The wave walking endurance lanes and the steam grotto recovery cavern will have you working out and recovering in no time. So, whether you're training for your next quest, recovering from your last one, or you simply don't want to drown, join us at the Gilded Griffin Aquatic Center, where strength flows, where the water goes.
All righty, let's bring this topic into light. Matt, kick us off. What is your takeaway from this banger of a session?
Well, it's the fact that I like to be fair, transparent, but I also do tend to potentially lean towards the players in my rulings. And I don't know. There's a lot to think about, and I've been reflecting on this session a lot, both because it was awesome, but also because I think it says a lot about me as a GM and the kinds of things I value and the kinds of things that influence my rulings in the moment.
And to piggyback on that, I'm just going to keep repeating this because it is kind of my North Star of GMing, and it's one of the things I look for as a player. Is the GM making a call? What you should be looking for, how should I answer this, is, yeah, that feels right. That feels like truth in our story. That feels like truth in our world. If you end up in that neighborhood, you're going to do all right.
Totally. And I think the best way to end up there is by telling your players the stakes, both narratively and mechanically. We've been talking about this a lot, and you've been talking about how you've kind of been trying to work this in. To me, it gives an amount of transparency where everybody knows when player characters' lives are on the line or the stakes are high. Tell your players up front before they roll or before you dive into that mechanical and narrative crunchy scene or whatever it is. Let everybody know, hey, how things are going to work, and here's what happens if you succeed, and maybe here's what happens likely if you fail.
Yeah, and I'm going to, yes, and what happens when you fail could be a random roll. Or It could be when you succeed. Who knows? But you can say, here's what the random roll would be. I'm going to flip my last takeaway to our players. When you want to take a big swing, I'm going to give you a sentence frame as a player. And this comes from my dear wife, who is an excellent player in her own right. And she will look at Matt or I and go, I'm going to try something. You tell me if or how it works. Here's what I want to happen. ... And then she explains the outcome she wants. And it might be ridiculous. It might be, I want to give my last hit point to a fellow player. As the torchlight grows dim and the water closes in around us, we hope you're able to find something useful in this episode that you could take into a future game. If you have any questions or unique experiences from your table that you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at dmdiariespod@gmail.com. You can also reach out via YouTube or Facebook. But best of all, get at us on the Dungeon Master Diaries thread on the Shadowdark Discord channel. It has been going off. You can find links to those feeds and other materials we referenced in this episode's show notes. Until next time, may your taverns be light and the water be dark.
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network. It is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production, is not affiliated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shadowdark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Oh man, I almost got the whole thing. Copyright 2023. Ah!
It's a banger!
It's like that intro and outro music. Oh!